Good morning, BookTube. Welcome to a new week in March and to a new video. So interestingly, today's video is some book recommendations for a readathon that I'm not participating in. March is middle grade March, and it's really hosted by Krista at Books and Jams. And I love middle grade reads, don't get me wrong, and I have a few that I'd really like to get to. But March was a pretty different TBR for me, and I've been a little bit more intentional about some of the backlists books and the arcs and other things that I want to get through this year, and I'm doing less readathons thus far. So 3 months in, or just at the start of the third month of the first quarter, I haven't done a single readathon yet, which is different from the way I was last year. But nevertheless, I love middle grade March, and I love looking at the recommendations by other people and the list of Newbery Award winners and all kinds of options for you. But I thought I would just bring you a couple of my favorites today, and some that I need to get to either as a reread or as a first-time read of a sequel. So let's get started. So one of the books I really love is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. This is an older, I think it's a Newbery Award winner. It is. And it was recently made into a motion picture, which I have to admit I haven't seen. And it's been a very long time since I've read this book. So I purchased this edition, I guess last year at some point, maybe the year before, in an effort to get to reread it before I see the movie. So that's the plan. So this follows a little girl named, let me make sure, Meg. How could I not know that? I have a Meg in my life, and her brother Charles and their friend Calvin, and they are taking on a really unique adventure that I don't want to say too much about, but it is fantastical. And there are 4 books in this series: A Wind in the Door, A Swiftly Tilting Planet, Many Waters, and An Acceptable Time. At some point, I would like to get to all of these, and I think I would like to collect them all in this edition, which is actually published by Square Fish, which is interesting, which must be a division of, it's an imprint of Macmillan Publishing, so that makes sense. This was originally published in 1962, so just after I was born. It is an older book, and I really love it. I think you would like it too. Another older book is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. This is actually not my copy. This belongs to my granddaughter, and I need to get it back to her. I got it for her one day when we took a trip and went to a bookstore, and she wanted it because it's one of her favorites and wanted to reread it and have it forever. And I took it to reread it and haven't brought it back to her, haven't finished the reread. This one is also a Newbery Medal Award winner and winner of the Boston Globe Horn Book Award and an American Library Association notable book. So this is a mystery. This one is published by Puffin, and this too was written a long time ago. This is an older book. It's kind of never lost its favor with readers. It was originally published in 1978, and it's a neat little story with a bunch of characters in a neighborhood, and it starts with Mr. Westing's will is read, and he has this fortune that he's passing on, and the neighborhood / community is really stunned by who he chooses to give the money to, and he has this sort of interesting game that he's proposed for all of the people that are involved in this novel, and it's just really, really fun. And again, I don't want to spoil it. It's really funny. I remember it being very amusing and light, even though it's a murder mystery. And I know that some people don't love murder mysteries for middle grade kids, but I, of course, grew up reading them, so I recommend them. I think they're fun. Another book that I absolutely loved and read a couple of years ago is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This is a signed copy that I actually picked up in a little free library. Can you imagine my excitement when that happened? This was published in 2012, and I think I read it in, I don't know, 2015 or so. It was not too long after it came out. I love this book because it really does help young people to understand the challenges that face any child who perceives him or herself as profoundly different in some way, and how to navigate the waters of what can be a very cruel group of peers in school. So this follows a boy named, I can't remember his name, Augie Pullman. How could I not remember that? And he has been born with a condition that causes a great deal of disfigurement. He's had a lot of surgeries. He has some medical challenges, but he's always been homeschooled. And suddenly he decides that he wants to go to school. And his parents are kind of hesitant to send him to school, but it does seem to be something that he really wants to do, and they think that perhaps it's good for him. And he meets some people in class that become his good friends. It's told from his sister's perspective. It's told from, as I remember, it's told from the perspective of a couple of his friends. His best friend is Summer, that I just adored, and then he has some other friends that he meets as well. What I also like is that one of his instructors, his teachers, has a quote that kind of carries them through the month, and he posts it on the blackboard each month. And so there's a lot of real uplifting, inspirational, poignant, and sometimes funny reading here, and I just adore it. I would reread it again and again. It was also made into a motion picture, and I feel like it was also a very successful movie. So if you haven't seen it or read it, I think you would like it. Now, this book is the sequel to Nevermore. There are, I think, 3 in this trilogy, and I don't know how many there will be, but I have not read Wondersmith yet. I have just read Nevermore, which is the first book in this series, and it is my intention to get to Wondersmith this year. I adored this series too. It is Harry Potter-esque. It has some certain themes that you will recognize from Harry Potter and from some other fantasy children's series. So the book follows Morrigan Crow, who was actually born as a cursed child, and so because she was born on Eventide, any child born on Eventide was considered to be cursed, and at some point in their lives, at some age, 11, 13-ish, I can't remember which, they are kind of cast out, and yeah, they're no longer acceptable to live in society. But what happens to Morrigan is that on the eve of Eventide, someone comes in and begins this turn of events, which leads to another person kind of saving her from destruction, if you will, saving her from that fate of other children born on that same day. The man who saves her is named Jupiter North, and then a series of things occur in which Jupiter moves her and puts her through what are called the trials of Nevermore in that community, in that city. And it's a fantasy. It's filled with friends and competitions and fantastical places, and Jupiter is a great character. I like Morrigan a lot. I really enjoyed this. So I do plan to get to this one soon. And then I think, like I said, there are currently 3 in this series. So this is book number 2. Nevermore is book number 1. And then Hollowpox is book number 3. And Hollowpox comes out sometime in 2020. So I've been anticipating that a lot. And then finally, probably my favorite, what I consider to be middle grade series of all, although some people do consider these to be more young adult, that series is Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I think that this is my all-time favorite young adult or children's middle grade series. I have several editions of this very first book in the series. I have a collector's edition that was published by Scholastic. Oh, look, the little cover case is missing. So this one is the original print, but just in a different binding with gilded pages. And then I have the illustrated versions too. I have books 1 through 3, I think, and I am about to pick up book number 4. I have a feeling I will collect other editions of these novels too. What I love about these stories is that they are fantasy, and they do root for a kind of an underdog character, a boy who's left on a doorstep by some magical wizards, and in the hope that his family, his mother's family, will care for him, but they are not kind to him. And when he reaches a certain age, he is called to go to Hogwarts, to attend school at Hogwarts, because he is a magical child. I can't imagine anyone who doesn't like Harry Potter, but I know there are some people in the world who don't. To me, it is an epic saga of life and challenge and death and building community and standing up for what's right and trying to understand who is true and who is not what they appear to be, and fighting good and evil, and just this hero story that takes us on a journey from year 1 to year 8. I don't know why I wanted him to have 8 years of school. I am not a big rereader of this series, and I think why I sometimes worry about some kids reading it is because as years 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 carry on, things get a little darker. But I like that about this series because I feel like it grew with the children who were reading it. Now, of course, I started reading it as an adult, and I read it before I passed it on to my kids, but I really saw it as something that was appealing to young people as well as to adults, more so sometimes for the adults in my life. And it really did grow and develop, and they got bigger and longer and more in depth, and certainly the plots twisted in ways that none of us could have seen happening. And we highly anticipated the end of this series, but also with sorrow because it was something that we loved so much. I remember the release nights that the book would be released on a midnight, and we would go to our local Barnes and Noble, and they would have a giant party. Even went to one of my local independent bookstores after they opened here. We had a giant party and anticipated that release and couldn't wait to get our hands on it. And sometimes we had to draw straws to see who in my family would read it first. Then we started buying more than one copy, which made much more sense. It just not only is a great series for me and has been a great read for me, but it also was a great experience in reading with my family. And it spanned more than just my me and my kids. It spanned other people in my family, and we all read it together, and it was so important to us. And so it will always be my favorite, I think. I can't imagine anything else ever topping that. So if you haven't ever read this, which I can't imagine, I encourage you to do that. And there are so many editions of this book. You may have seen in the Advent Book Exchange that Megan got 3 of the Ravenclaw special house editions at Christmas. I found those for her. They're releasing those little by little over the span of, I guess, the next year or two. There are just so many incredible editions. The illustrated editions are fantastic. If you've never seen those, they're so heavy. Let me just pick a random page. Look at that. I mean, this is just the best. A friend of mine read through this with her children while listening to it because they were too young at that time to read it independently. I think that's a great idea. It is available easily on audiobook, and I do think that that would be a lovely way to reread this series. There's also a podcast called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which I think I've talked about in another video about reading podcasts, where they go through chapter by chapter of this series, and they focus on one particular word or aspect of that particular chapter. And there's a whole process behind reading the Bible or any other spiritual book as a sacred text. But then there are others who have read Harry Potter as a sacred text, and Jane Eyre, I think, as a sacred text. So there's a lot of people that do that with classic literature. But if you're interested in rereading it very, very slowly and taking each chapter apart, chapter by chapter, you certainly can do that. I started to do that last year or the year before, and I didn't get very far. I didn't get very far at all. Not going to lie. I just didn't have the bandwidth for it, I think, and didn't make it a priority, but I might do it again. Anyway, always a favorite. In fact, here's my bookmark that I made from when I was reading it as a sacred text. It will always, always, always be deeply embedded in my heart and my mind and my spirit. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about these great middle grade reads that I think are great, and I hope you will take a look at them if you haven't already, and tell me what your favorite middle grade or young adult books are. And if you're reading for middle grade March, let me know what you're picking up. I'm really, really curious about that. I know there are so many middle grade books that are memorable to people, and I really love to take a look at them. They're fast reads. They're usually very fun and light, and then I can pass them along to my grandkids and my friends who are that age. So always special to be able to pass along a book that you have loved. Enjoy and have a very happy reading day. Bye.